Hello everybody, I'm Martin. Welcome to another episode of Minecraft Enigmatica 2 Expert. Today, we're going to try to unblock our progress and get back into Draconic Evolution. And if we look at the Draconic Evolution chapter, you might remember that we were stuck on the Wyvern core for multiple reasons. If we look at it, we can start with the first reason, which was I needed Pladium, which only comes from a tier 3 void miner or above. Well, problem solved. I have a tier 3 void miner. And if you look down here, you can see it shooting out a blue laser because I got tired of messing around without the proper laser lens, and it's going a lot faster than the last tier was. So I think that's probably what we're going to do from now on. I'm now sitting on like close to 400 Palladium, which is good because I need it for both the next void miner as well as Draconic Evolution. And while we're here, let's take a look at the void miner and notice that it is using 123,000 RF. And that's with 8 speed upgrades inside of it. So be aware of what you're getting into power-wise before you upgrade to this tier or above. John, looking at you, I know that you ran into this like 6 months ago, man. The Void Miner was only but one of the problems we needed. We also ran out of all of my Draconium dust. Well, problem solved. I have over 2,000 blocks of it now, thanks to mystical agriculture as well as mining on other planets, so that's no longer part of the problem. So let's talk about the other obstacles we have to go through to get this, because we've got the Pladium and we've got the Draconium now. We also need Primal Mana from Thermal Foundation. And Primal Mana is made by alloying IC2 coolant, which we're thankfully already making upstairs in our IC2 section of our lab to make overclockers with, so I can bucket that out, but I don't have a way to automate it yet. We need Glow Glass from Mechanism, which is an alloy of osmium, refined obsidian, and refined glowstone, all of which I had to automate to do this next step, so I had to add an osmium compressor to my lab, but that wasn't hard. As well as Molten Mirian, which is an alloy of all of the Botania metals, as well as cobalt and glass if you are doing it inside a smeltery. I would not recommend doing it this way though. Instead, I would look up the ingot and notice that it can be done in the Advanced Metallurgic Fabricator without the cobalt or without fiddling with an actual smeltery. The same can be done with the Glow Glass, by the way. And thankfully, I'd already wired this up previously. I think I showed it in one of the other episodes. There's an ME interface right there to do it. I just had to add the recipes. But I did run into an obstacle with the Mirian. It uses so much power that these signal plated impulse ducts couldn't actually send enough power into it. I had to put a resonant energy cell here, as well as a resonant energy flux duct to be able to pass in enough to process it. It's not a huge problem, but it does require buffering to be able to handle this. The solution would be not to use the signal-plated flux ducts, but we are passing items into it, and that's a problem for another day's art. But for now, this is at least letting me mass produce them. And the reason we're mass producing them is because I wanted to try out this particular layout right here, which I've never used before. The Tinker's Construct Melters and Alloy Furnace, which I've never used. The Alloy Furnace will take any liquid from a smeltery or a melter next to it, pull it into it if it can be alloyed together, and process it. So I've got a tank on one side for the IC2 coolant, and then 2 melters, one for Glow Glass and one for the Mirian. Ignore the lava tank there, it's just what I happen to have lying around. I would use liquid starlight, but it was already full of lava from when I replaced it in my smeltery. But this setup basically takes one Glow Glass ingot, 1 Mirian ingot, and 1 bucket of IC2 coolant, and processes it into a bucket of liquid Primal Mana. You notice there's 3 buckets worth in here. It's because I've already processed 2, because these melters have space for 3 ingots in them. So while I don't have this solved for automation quite yet, it's pretty close to good to go. I could move this into my lab now and make sure it's hooked up to an ender tank to always have fuel and start processing the ingots that way. There is, however, one last problem, and that's the Ludicrite ingot, which you can craft in blocks in either the Carpenter or the Advanced Carpenter using liquid DNA from Gendustry. None of these things are individually all that hard to do. We have most of these pieces, especially the plutonium blocks now, but I don't have the Gendustry stuff wired up to be automated. So we're just going to manually make those for now until we figure out a better way of handling that. That said, to do this, we have to make the DNA extractor, which we have not previously. It uses genetics labware that can be consumed, but it can use saplings and not just bee byproducts. But the DNA extractor itself is pretty easy to make. We just haven't had a reason to make it yet. We did make the meat image producer, and it's pretty close to the same as that. So some bad news, it only works with forestry trees. So I don't have a ton of these made. I don't have their ton of saplings just being churned out by my tree farm or anything. But there is an alternative. You can just plant a single forestry tree somewhere nearby. And Gendustry has this item called the Pollen Collection Kit, which it just uses the genetics labware, string, and a paper. which just consumes diamonds per 16. And you can just right click on the leaves and get as much pollen as you want. Each pollen gives you 400 DNA. So not ideal, especially not for automating. Well, we'll need saplings or something to do that more easily. But for now, this will at least get us through the manual steps. All right, so I'm back outside of my fusion fuel farm in the end because I realized I didn't want to make the ender amethysts. Because making them manually requires making terrestrial artifacts and a bunch of elementium, which we have, but the terrestrial artifacts require a bunch of empowered actually additions crystals, which are kind of a pain to make. I mean, I have it partially automated. I probably should fully automate it, but it's super time consuming and the empowerer is just slow. So it was just quicker just to throw up a laser base out here since I've got a chunk loaded area anyways, throw in a bunch of magenta laser lenses and just let this process, and I can send these back now. And really, this is mostly just a bootstrap making the ender amethyst seeds, which requires a bunch of blocks of amethyst. So this is just to get us through the initial steps of this, but this at least isn't hard. Have I mentioned that I'm lazy? Alright, having squared away the ender amethyst, now we just need to slot the last item into the carpenter, the plutonium, and let it cook. I probably should be automating this at this point, but the alumite can only be made through a smeltery, and I'm lazy. It's not actually hard. I probably could do it with a pair of melters and an alloys furnace just like below earlier, but I'm just lazy. I'll get around to it eventually, but it's not hard to manually make a ton of it all at once. But now we have a couple blocks of Ludicrite to go make Wyvern cores with, which just requires I go set up another carpenter now and throw the Primal mana in, and we should have everything we need. Alright, and now we have the Wyvern core cooking. And we are now officially unblocked, although one of the first things I'm going to need to do offline, off camera, is go automate making these. I have the Draconic core automated, but not these, and this is a bit harder because you just said everything went into it. I just need to line up everything to go handle it though and figure out how to handle the pollen. So that's a problem for later. Just because we're unblocked on the Wyvern core doesn't now mean we can freely move through Draconic Evolution because we're hitting a new roadblock here. And that's because the core of this goes up through fusion crafting over to the Awakened Draconium Ingot. And the fusion crafting and pretty much most of the stuff linked to this requires delving into extended crafting and making the crafting core and a whole bunch of pedestals for it. So I think we're just not going to continue at this point because extended crafting is its own huge big thing that will take forever to go through. And unfortunately, I think this is how a lot of this is going to go, starting with Draconic Evolution up into the Dragonite section, where individual components are just going to be extremely expensive or hard to figure out until we can automate them. Because we still don't have this one automated. It's close, because I could move this array into my automated crafting area and wire this up now if I really wanted to. It wouldn't be that hard. I probably need to go do that just to clean up my base. And then it handles the Primal mana, and then we just need to move the Gendustry stuff inside, and I think I can get the pollen with a mechanical user and then automatically pipe in its tool to do that. It should all be doable. I just need to go wire it up. I'll probably go do that on my off time because that's less important. But this is just how it's going to be from here on out. So I think this is a good place to call it for the day. So if you found this interesting and entertaining, please consider subscribing if you aren't, or leaving a like. As always, I'm Ard. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.